And welcome to the third of our Lunchtime Agritourism webinars. Today's topic is the rules navigating and negotiating permits and regulations. I'm Penny Leff, Agritourism Coordinator with the University of California Small Farm Program, and I'll be your host today. I'm going to jump right into introducing our first speaker, Karen Giovannini. And Karen is the Agricultural Ombudsman for Sonoma County. Since piloting the position in 2012, she has worked with a variety of different types of agricultural enterprises, from produce growers to cheesemakers to processed food operations. She successfully worked with her county planning department to reduce permitting for small-scale ag processing. Currently, they are working together to find workable solutions to address the lack of local poultry processing. Karen finds the most challenging part of her job is getting the regulators to bend to her will. Okay, here's Karen.
Hi, thanks, Penny, and thank you for having me today. I'm going to be covering the super exciting topic of permits and regulations. And it's going to be quick, it's going to be somewhat overwhelming, no doubt, and it's probably going to be partially dream crushing, but let's not let it do that. So today I'm going to be covering business plans and zoning, building, water and septic, accessibility, food safety, special events, and I'm going to give you some advice on where to start. Three key items I want you to take away from this is that you need to write a business plan. You need to know your zoning and what is and is not allowed on your parcels, and also a basic understanding of the activities and that might require permits and where to go to find out. So let's just keep in mind that even though permits and regulations are horrible and dream crushing and won't let you do what you want to do half the time, or won't let you do it in the way you want to do it, they are part of doing business, and they do help reduce your risk of liability, because if you've ever been to a place where clearly they have built things that are not to code, yet the public is walking around, and you know that there's just an accident waiting to happen, that entity is up for a higher level of, they're putting a higher level of risk, taking on a higher level of risk than is really necessary if they would follow the codes and obtain the correct permits, then they would greatly reduce their risk of liability. So just keep that in mind. So the first thing you want to have is a business plan. Everybody should have a business plan that's in business, and because it helps you stay focused on what you want to accomplish, and it just gives you an outline and a plan for where you want to take your business. So in that plan, you want to include all the activities and products that you're thinking of, that you want to do, things that you're doing now, things you want to do in the medium term, things you want to do in the long term. Anticipate number of visitors and the months of operation and the hours of operation. Existing water and septic, you want to make sure that you have adequate of both, and you want to know that you have adequate of both and not guess. What are the surrounding land uses? Are you surrounded by open space? Are you surrounded by little ranchettes? These are the things you want to, just be aware of. You want to have a map of your farm or your location, where people are going to park, where the activities are going to be, where the pathways are going to be, all these types of things. And you should know the status of your Williamson Act contract if you are under Williamson Act. So just keep in mind that if you fail to plan, then you should plan to fail. So first of all, I want to just talk really briefly about the regulatory agencies. Who are they? What's the story with regulatory agencies? There are different types. There's federal, state, regional, and local. So your federal is like USDA, FDA, Those are the two that are most likely to influence your business or have any uh, related to your business. Besides IRS, which I do cover in another slide briefly. IRS, of course, affects all of us. So, your state agencies are CDFA, which is California Department of Food and Agriculture, and the California Department of Public Health. Again, those are under, so CDFA is under USDA, CDPH is under EPA. So, and the way that the regulations work is there's the federal level, then the states can add their own to the federal level, and then local municipalities can add their own requirements to what's already been given to them by the state, which was given to them by the feds. So, for example, in California, we're prone to earthquakes and fires, so there's going to be additional regulations and requirements around building for earthquake and fire, for example. And then regional is like the regional air quality control boards and the water districts. So they don't follow the county lines, they have their own outlines. And then local is your counties and cities, municipalities. So usually the local agencies are the ones that you will be dealing with, and they carry out all the regulations. They are the enforcing agency for, well, in the case of the Agriculture Department, they're enforcing agency for CDFA. In the case of the Health Department, they are the enforcing agency for California Department of Public Health. So just keep that in mind. So the one thing you need to know about your parcels is what is the zoning. And so the zoning is, so there's a general plan that all counties and municipalities, all areas of the state have a general plan that dictates how development is to occur, how land use is to occur. So there will be general areas of land use. For example, agriculture is a big area. Residential could be a big area. Commercial could be a big area. So there's, on the maps, they're outlined by the parcels, and each parcel is in its own zone. And that zone may have other overlays, not to complicate it, but for example, you could be an ag zone and you could also be in a scenic corridor. So that's just an example. And so you would check out in your zoning code, your county zoning code or your municipality zoning code, what is your zone for your parcel, and in that will outline what is allowed by right, meaning things that you can do without a use permit. For example, in agricultural zone, you can farm without a use permit. And then permitted activities, which would be activities that require a conditional use permit or some type of permit for that land use because it is more intensive. And that would be, for example, maybe agricultural processing is something that is allowed, but you would need a permit to do it on an agricultural zone. So, so that's just a little background on what zoning is. And then, so depending on what you want to do, you may have to obtain a use permit or some type of permit, depending on the type of activities you want to do. So if any of your activities include buildings, or you're going to either build buildings or repurpose buildings, for example, you have a barn and you want to start offering farm-to-table dinners, or you want to start offering educational classes in that barn, then you're going to be bringing the public into the barn. The barn was not built, I mean, I'm sure the barn is quite old and has withstood the test of time, but it was not built to California Building Code, more than likely. And your building department may require that you make certain upgrades to the building, to the barn in this case, to allow for the public to use it, which will reduce your risk of liability. So any, most things that you would do to a building, many things that you would do to a building would require some type of permit, such as sometimes roofing requires a permit, or painting even, but for sure structural changes to the building, just adding on to a building, adding a new building, demolishing a building sometimes requires permits as well. So just keep that in mind. Another area that you want to keep in mind is accessibility. So as you know, we live in a very litigious society. In California, we are one of the most ADA compliant states, and ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a federal act. California is ADA plus. So we took the ADA requirements and then added more to them, of course. So we are one of the most litigious, there's a lot of ADA litigation that occurs in California. There are people that have the disabled placards, certain types, ambulance chaser types, that will go around and look for ADA violations. And in our county, for example, there's a zero tolerance on ADA violations or ADA requirements. When you are building a building and you have to include accessibility, there is zero tolerance. Like if you're off by ½ inch, you will have to fix it, even if it requires ripping out something and putting some, and redoing it. There is a zero tolerance for being out of compliance in our county, and I would imagine a lot of counties are like that due to the fact that there's so much litigation around it. It's not because they, it could be wide enough for whatever is needed. It's just that because there's so much litigation, the counties feel like they have to have zero tolerance. So just keep that in mind, that you will want to consider accessibility. Under California law, any violation of the ADA is considered a civil rights violation and is subject to a minimum statutory penalty of $4,000 plus attorney fees. So just keep that in mind, please. And I'm not saying that to scare you, and it's not likely that the ambulance chasers would come to your place, but you do need to be aware of that. So water and septic, like I said, you need to make sure you have adequate of both. You're going to need to have them tested. Don't just guess, because if you bring in people and you let them use your septic system and your septic system gets overwhelmed, then that could require that you put in a whole new septic system, which would be far more costly than to do it correctly in the first place or make some kind of accommodations. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that you that if you're serving well water, that water has to be tested, and depending on the number of people and the number of times that people are there, it could be either state or county regulated. So I'm not going to go into the details on that, but at any rate, let's move on to taxes and business law. So y'all know that IRS will issue your tax ID number for your business. You need to get a business license. It's not required for sole proprietorships or general partners. Your county may require it, but all other forms of business need to register with the state as far as a business license. If you have overnight guests, you need to collect the transient occupancy tax. If your business name does not include your surname, then you need to obtain a fictitious business name statement. And if you have employees, you need to be aware of employee law, or labor laws, I mean. Other agencies that you may have to deal with directly or indirectly through a planning department is your Public Works or Caltrans, depending on the type of road that you're on. They are concerned with traffic and road signs. So if you are going to be putting up road signs, Signs you need to check with your county. You should check with your county to make sure that you're in sign compliance. And if if you have a building, or you may have to deal with a fire agency. There are certain reasons why you would have to deal with them. Your planning department will probably tell you if you need to deal with them. Your ag commissioner and sealer weights and measures. If you're selling products by weight, the scale in this picture is not certifiable. You need to use a certifiable scale, and you need to bring it into the ag commissioner's office once a year to have it calibrated, and they put their seal on it saying that this scale is accurate, and you renew that annually. If you're farming organically and you want to be able to say that you're farming organically, or you want to put that on your labels, you need to register with the state of California or your ag commissioner's office that you're an organic farmer. If you are using pesticides on produce that will be used for food, then you need to register with your ag commissioner. And if you are going to be selling produce at a certified farmer's market, you need to obtain a certified producer certificate. Okay, so let's move on into food safety and the sale of food. So there's a California Retail Food Code, which you may want to become familiar with if you are selling food other than whole produce. This outlines what you can and cannot do at your farm. And it doesn't really speak to when a permit is required, but it outlines what is allowed and what's not allowed. So your farm, if you have a farm stand, it is considered a retail food facility because you are selling food retail at your facility, which is your farm stand. But a farm stand selling whole produce does not need a permit from the health department. You may need a permit from your planning department depending on if that's an allowed land use, which goes back to your zoning. But you don't need one from the health department. If you are sampling food or allowing tasting of food, then you will need to obtain a permit from the health department to do that. And they will want you to have hand washing stations and be able to wash utensils. If you're selling produce that is not grown on your site, you would need to check with your county to see if that is even allowed. If it's your own produce grown on a different parcel, it's probably allowed. If it's somebody else's produce, then that's a little more complicated. You need to have permission from your county, but you also need to obtain a permit from the health department to allow you to do that. Even if you're not tasting or sampling, you still need to get a permit to sell somebody else's produce. If you are doing an event where you're going to be serving food to people or having food served to people, you would probably want to use a licensed caterer to do that because the food needs to be prepared in a licensed facility. And also, if you are selling alcohol, you would definitely need to use a caterer that has a license, unless the only exception is a license and also an ABC license to allow them to sell and serve alcohol. The only exception is nonprofit events. They can do something once a year, I think, and you can obtain a permit for that and not have to use a licensed caterer. But again, if you're probably serving food at that same event, so you would want to use a licensed caterer. And I'll go into food preparation in the next slide. And if you want to sell non-farm products, meaning not grown on your farm, so things such as jams and jellies, perhaps you made in your cottage food operation or a commercial kitchen, you would need to obtain a permit from the health department to do that. And even if you wanted to sell bottled water, things that you didn't make, you would still need to obtain a permit from the health department. You're allowed 50 square feet of shelf space to sell these non-farm products. So, and that also includes artwork and things that you may have made, wreaths and all that. So, okay. And nobody's gonna go around and say, oh my God, you took up more than 50 square feet, especially if you want to make it pretty and spread it around. It's just, it's not, your farm stand is to sell produce and it is not a retail store. So just keep that in mind. That's what the 50 square feet is about. Okay. So yeah, let's get into food handling. And please do not be like Dan Aykroyd here, who was playing Julia Child and didn't handle a knife quite properly. But at any rate, food that is prepared for human consumption must be prepared in a retail food facility or in a licensed kitchen. So that would require a processed food registration, or in the case of a caterer, a caterer's license. So a processed food registration is for if you want to make jams, for example, and you don't want to make it, you're going to either make more than what is allowed with a cottage food operation, or your recipe does not call for half sugar like the cottage food operation requirements are. So you're going to want to make that, you need to make that in a commercial kitchen, licensed kitchen. And you obtain that license by working with California Department of Public Health to obtain a processed food registration. And that is a process, but you would also need to get a food safety certification for at least one of the people that is working on this project, that is going to be hopefully your principal person or you yourself that is making the jam. And then anybody that's helping with that process needs to obtain a food handler's card. And you should also be aware that there are a lot of labeling requirements, and I'm not going to go into them, but you just need to know that there are many, and to be aware of them and to follow labeling requirements, because if you don't label properly and your product gets inspected at a grocery store, for example, you run the risk of the inspector pulling your product and condemning it because it's not labeled properly. So just keep that in mind. Okay, special events. So there are, what are special events? Sometimes, I know in our county, special events are kind of becoming a big deal because of all the traffic and the wineries. So, so we're especially sensitive to it here. You may not be so sensitive in the county that you're in. But I will give you a caution. You need to understand your parcel zoning again to know what is and is not allowed. A permit may be required for certain special events, for example, weddings. If you're serving food, drinks, and alcohol, you're going to want to use a licensed caterer. You need to be aware of traffic, parking. If you are especially coming off of a main road, you do not want to cause traffic problems. So be able to get people off the road and onto your property with a minimal amount of backups. And you want to be cautious about disrupting your neighbors. Now, the caution I wanted to share with you is that weddings are a great way to, weddings and events like that are a great way to bring in additional income to your farm. And they used to be not a big deal here in this county, and weddings happened infrequently enough that they didn't cause any issues. But now there's a lot of destination weddings that come here, and the neighbors are tired, some of the neighbors are tired of it. And so now it's getting to the point where if the use of weddings is not on the use permit for your parcel, you will not be allowed to do weddings. So I would say that if you are going to be doing things like weddings or out of the box, non-farm type income streams, somehow try to get that onto your use permit or something about your parcel with your planning department that you are doing these, and just so that if it becomes an issue, if you see down the road that this is going to become an issue or could become an issue, at least if you have it on your use permit or something about your parcel saying that this is an allowed use, then you'll be okay. It's just a little protection. It's a little caution for you. So, just to recap, you want to start with a business plan. Have that business plan in place. You want to know your zoning. If you're going to be doing something new on your parcel, you want to meet with your neighbors, meet with the planning department, and meet with the health department, if you're doing anything with food, to find out what it is regulatory-wise that you will need to do. Additional resources include the Small Farm Program Agritourism page, Farms Reach, so that we can continue the conversation there on the agritourism group. I have fact sheets that I've created on the Ag Ombudsman site in Sonoma County. And also there are these publications written about agritourism enterprises on your farm or ranch, which will give you more in-depth information about what to consider when you're writing your business plan and when you're considering expanding your operation. So I want to thank you again, and if there are any questions, we'll take them at the end. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Karen. That was a wonderful wealth of information. We are going to continue to talk with you on Farms Reach, and we are also posting your handout, which accompanies this presentation, on the UC Small Farm Program website and on the Farms Reach website. Thank you very much.